If you're not already subscribed to this YouTube channel, go ahead and hit the subscribe button now, along with the bell icon so you can be notified whenever a new video is posted. And if you're already subscribed, check and make sure that YouTube hasn't unsubscribed you. And of course, be sure to give the video a like, as well as share it on your social media. The white supremacists hate that. Now, that said, got to give credit to Tariq for helping to bring this to people's attention, because this happens to be something very important that as many people as possible in the Black media need to be repeating this and making sure that everybody hears about this. As most of you have probably heard, New York Governor Andrew Cuomo has been in the news in recent weeks, though not for anything good. First, it was about how he covered up the number of nursing home COVID deaths, and more recently, there's been a slew of white women coming out the woodwork accusing him of all manner of lecherous behavior. There was even a media dust-up after it was revealed that the governor gave his brother Chris Cuomo and his family special COVID testing last year after the CNN personality began to experience symptoms. So while Chris Cuomo was shucking and jiving with his brother on air, those two clearly, we're going to go ahead and use this as an opportunity to get some publicity for Governor Cuomo, just in case that lung-headed moron decides that he wants to make a presidential run. All the while, Chris Cuomo is getting that VIP treatment. And Governor Cuomo decided, well, it's on a need-to-know basis. You don't need to know. And keep in mind, as Jason Black pointed out when he took out a billboard in New York City, Governor Cuomo has not moved a muscle to make racial profiling a crime in his state. However, he did chime in when his Attorney General, Letitia James, declared that New York State would vigorously go after and prosecute any crimes against Asians, something that this Black woman, who's the Attorney General, never did for Black people. And it was Letitia James' little announcement that opened the signal for the white media that this was going to be the beginning of a pushing back against Black people protesting anti-Black violence by the state and by private citizens. So you see, last month was pretty rough for old Governor Cuomo, but apparently not rough enough, because the beginning of this month, Cuomo's office announced that New York State would be setting up a $2 billion slush fund. And who's going to be the beneficiary of this slush fund? Illegal aliens, to the tune of $15,000 apiece. They're doing it under the pretense that this is COVID relief. So rather than arrest and deport people who are in the country illegally, Governor Cuomo's going to give them $15,000 each. Gee, how much in COVID relief have legal citizens gotten in total from the government at any level? The Democrats are pushing hard as hell to woo the Latino vote because that's who this is aimed at. Latino culture is more amenable to right-wingers, as we see in their home countries, and since the Democrats have been seen as a party that claims to support Black people, at least on paper, Latinos have been trying to make inroads with the Republicans. The Democrats are launching an all-hands-on-deck offensive to attract as many non-Black voters as possible, particularly Latinos and casual racists, read white moderates, who both the Republicans and Democrats these days are calling Biden Republicans. This is what's going on right now, just a few months after the election. Biden hasn't even finished his first 100 days in office, and look what you see the Democrats doing. So it ain't just at the federal level, where they're trying to solidify as many non-Black votes as possible so they can shore up the Democratic Party. You're not going to be able to have controlled opposition if the controlled opposition is gutted. And on the other hand, you've also got the states deciding that at the state level, they're going to also be propping up this anti-Black scheme. So the Democrats have decided they need a new voter base. And that voter base is going to be comprised of groups who have historically shown hostility towards us. And why the desperation? Why the rush? Because these guys are pushing this stuff through at warp speed. They're just being blatantly open about it. So why? This is a move of desperation, several moves of desperation. Why so scared? Committing billions of dollars to this effort in New York State alone. No matter what their rhetoric may be when it comes to Black people, both political parties are carrying out the same policy of safeguarding and ensuring white supremacy. Because right now we've put pressure on them. Black people are being killed in the streets. The state attorney general, Letitia James, is telling everybody her hands were tied. Hate crime, what's that? There's no grounds. The legal barrier too high. The legal standard's too high, you see. Asians claim that some black person had an argument with them. Letitia James declares she's going on a war against anti-Asian violence. Black people take out billboards demanding reparations. These clowns duck and dodge the issue. Illegal aliens tell the Dems that they might vote for them if they give them a check. And the Democrats immediately set aside billions for these illegal aliens. Folks, these white supremacists on the left can't make it any clearer who they are and what their plan is and has always been. And what about the so-called black leaders? Where are they when all this is going down? Shouldn't they be lodging some sort of complaint, or at the very least going, hey, what about us? They should be saying something, you would think, but they're saying nothing at all. You can't find them. Oh, the same morons who were cheerleading for these guys, now that they're looking and seeing $15,000 checks being cut, all of a sudden they're falling real quiet. Well, as usual, they happily allowed this anti-black scumbag Cuomo to use them as a backdrop for a photo op. I mean, these photos haven't aged very well in just a few weeks. Oh, they were skinning and grinning standing beside Cuomo. Then Cuomo turns around and says, $15,000 each for illegal aliens. And Cuomo chose black flunkies in particular for a reason, because black voters are the most solidly Democratic, and because after last year it was clear that many black voters are still willing to vote for a Democratic candidate and expect nothing in return. This was Cuomo's way of pointing out to everyone, declaring, hey, a picture speaks 1,000 words. I got these niggers on lock. I got that black support sewn up. At least that's what he's hoping the picture is going to insinuate. That, hey, I got that black support on lock. And no matter what the media might be saying today, I'm going to be fine come election day because black people are still with them. So the Republicans can forget about a recall election like they're attempting with Gavin Newsom, who doesn't have black support, mainly because he and Nancy Pelosi ethnically cleansed San Francisco of black residents a long time ago. Black voters are the base of the Democratic Party, and at least as far as optics goes, Andrew Cuomo feels like he's got his ducks in a row. And those dumb Negroes who are smiling with him, well, you can't find them now. Yeah, now that Cuomo's shown, okay, we've gotten past this media crisis, back to the agenda of putting you Negroes as far underneath everybody else as possible. We got to lock you guys in as a permanent underclass because you're kind of making noise and such. And it's time to go ahead and elevate every other group way beyond you at warp speed. Last time we saw a maneuver like this from a New York politician, it was Mike Bloomberg during his failed run for president. He was careful to stage manage his photo ops and to make certain that he only allowed black flunkies like the mayor of Houston or some pork chop preacher to be around him. Bootlick Negroes who would gladly kiss his behind for the chance to chase some clout. Soulless, unprincipled creeps like this are the only kind of black folks that Bloomberg wants around him. Bloomberg knew that running in New York City would be perilous for him. Black New Yorkers remember stop and frisk, and they're not about to forgive him for it. Bloomberg himself made all manner of anti-black remarks, defending the harassment and even killings of black people at the hands of the thugs in blue. He only began to pipe down some of his race-baiting rhetoric when he was nearing the end of his term limit as mayor and began to seriously start thinking about running for higher office. That's when he decided that maybe he might want to keep some of his anti-black remarks to himself, try to moderate his profile a little bit. So he figured when he made his lunkhead run for president, he would do his campaigning in the deep South, because surely the black voters down there hadn't heard about his racist policies or his own personal racist behavior and comments. At least that's what he thought. Problem for him was that there was a black media on the march, educating black people about his record. So when he slithered his way into Chapel AME Church in Selma and had that bootlick pulpit pimp preacher who allowed his church to be used as a backdrop for that racist photo op, there were black congregants who stood up and made it clear they weren't having it. They turned their backs on Bloomberg, and the white media couldn't do nothing but take pictures. Yeah, he got photobombed, just not the way he would have liked. That killed Michael Bloomberg's presidential hopes right there. In fact, it probably killed whatever plans of a political future he might have hoped for. But the killing part was that the same white media who just a week or so earlier had been boldly bragging that stop and frisk hasn't hurt Bloomberg's black support at all. Black voters don't seem to really care about stop and frisk. Why, the white media says it, so it's from God's lips to our ear, and we're telling you this is the God's onto these niggers. You niggers don't care about stop and frisk. You really don't. That's what they were saying all the way up until that black congregation at Chapel AME Church turned their backs on Bloomberg. Then all of a sudden the white media quietly withdrew that asinine assertion. They weren't saying that mess anymore, but it just went to show that's their job. Their job is not to report black opinion. It is to dictate to us what they think black opinion should be, and to see how many Negroes will be dumb enough to go for it. You see, Governor Cuomo knows this. He knows all of this. He knows that he better stick to small little gatherings where, no, there ain't going to be no members of the public allowed in. It's just going to be the same hand-picked Negroes who we always have, the usual suspects. He's not about to do what Bloomberg did and risk going in front of the black masses where he could get embarrassed. He needs to create the false impression that black folks love him, or at least he needs to be able to say, hey, here's some black folks who could hold down their lunch and hold their nose just long enough to take a picture with me. Just like with Ralph Northam of Virginia after his blackface scandal, and just like Joe Biden when the '94 crime bill was dragging down his presidential campaign, Cuomo surrounded himself with a few hand-picked, subservient, servile Negroes, media-approved bootlicks who the Democrats have on the take, who depend on the white left for every crumb of their daily bread and will do anything just to have their picture taken with some prominent white celebrity. But now, just a couple of weeks after these lapdogs lent their melanin to his publicity stunt, because that's the reason why they're there, we need some dark-skinned folk to stand next to this racist. I should do it, massive. How does Cuomo repay his loyal bootlicks? Does he put money into black businesses? Hell, does he even put any money into the bootlicks' pockets? Does he set aside money for black people who have been the hardest hit by the economic consequences of the lockdown? No. Instead, Cuomo gives money to illegal aliens who don't even have the ability to vote for him. This is from the governor of New York, which is where the big networks are all headquartered, so they, of course, would cover whatever self-serving publicity stunt that he pulled. This was meant to send a political message, one that would be a signal event to the other Democratic enclaves across the country. New York was announcing to everyone to see them tell black people, hey, there's nothing we can do when you niggers are murdered, while at the same time telling Asians, hey, we'll go to the mat for you guys. And there was a black attorney general who said that. Now they're sending the same message economically. Black folks who have been disproportionately disadvantaged by COVID and the lockdown, who have disproportionately suffered. What are you doing for black people? Not a damn thing. Well, are you doing anything for anybody? Sure, these illegal aliens over here, especially if they speak Spanish, we're going to make sure that we trip over ourselves to set aside billions in free cash for them. By the way, how many illegal aliens are there in New York State to begin with? There's some massive numbers of them. Since at least 3 of the major networks are headquartered in New York, and because one of the biggest papers in the country is also headquartered there, you better believe whenever New York does something politically, the rest of the country is going to hear about it. And that's deliberate. They want to make sure people know, hey, here's a bellwether event, sending the signal out loud and clear. This is the direction we're supposed to be going in, folks. That's the job that the white media serves, to confuse and hopefully undermine the masses through disinformation, but also to send out the signal to everybody, hey, here's the agenda we need to get on code for. These little stunts the New York State has been doing, deciding they would ignore black people, but they were going to prioritize hate crimes against everybody else. In fact, stuff that's just minor things that aren't even hate crimes at all. Well, we're going to show that anything that happens to a group that we're looking out for is going to be prosecuted as a hate crime. Black people, it doesn't matter if you got some member of the KKK guns you down while screaming nigger, nigger, and says, I've been planning to kill a black person for the last 50 years. That's not a hate crime. But there's always going to be some excuse. That lets you know there's a lot of black folks who the Democrats have on the take who are so devoted, so slavishly enthralled to, and just giddy in the behind to serve the interests of white supremacy that they will gladly tell black folks, we're going to let everybody take shots at you and kill you, and we're going to make sure that black people have absolutely no place that they can expect their rights to be respected, and that everybody's just going to be taking pot shots at you, and we're going to help them do it. Letitia James is not some innocent bystander or some befuddled, incompetent civil servant. She is a willing and eager participant and collaborator with white supremacy. She is as much an anti-black racist as an Andrew Cuomo or a Daniel Pentalio. No, these guys have never done anything to help black people. Nobody declaring that if you harm a black person, that's going to be treated as a hate crime. If a black person says you looked at them funny, that's going to be a hate crime. Hey, black folks have been the hardest hit as a result of the COVID lockdowns. Well, here's a $15,000 check. No, they don't do that for black people. They make it very clear. This is not going to be about black people. That is meant to let everybody be put on notice. There's an audience they're trying to reach, a national audience. This isn't about a handful of illegal aliens in New York State. This is about setting a bellwether event to let everybody else know, hey, you-hoo, here's the direction that we're going in. Last year it was, well, there are people more important than black folks, you know. Why are we focusing on these black people's complaints? We ought to be focusing on what everybody else is whining about instead. And this year it's, hey, we're going to cut a check, but it's going to be for everybody else. And then we're going to tell black people, what can we do? There's no money. And there's going to be these black bootlegs going, well, what can they do? Ain't no money. And neither Biden nor any other Democrat is advocating that Congress should copy New York's example for black people. Where's your Congressional Black Caucus at? Where are your black so-called intellectuals at? Where are the clowns who were cheerleading for Biden last year? If a single state can set aside billions on a whim to give free checks to illegals just because, then the federal government can start sending out hundreds of billions in checks to us. Because unlike the illegal aliens, A, we're citizens, B, we're actually owed the money. But a lot of black folks who live in the permanent land of apathy and denial, they are looking for any reason that they can not to have to fight white supremacy, not to have to challenge white supremacy, because once you start stepping up about a check, it becomes a matter of sooner or later, I got to get in your face about it. And there are black folks who are like, I'd rather go back to Xbox or watching reruns of The Real Housewives, and who gives a damn? There's a lot of black folks who would much rather just change the channel. Challenge white supremacy, they're not about to. Don't let some idiot tell you that the money isn't there. All those morons who spent the last few years and the last 24 months in particular telling us, y'all saying cut the check, brother, the states is broke, brother, they ain't got no money. Yeah, well, New York State certainly seems to have found billions of dollars for illegal aliens, people who aren't even citizens. They seem to have found the money very quickly. Gee, whatever happened to there was going to be partisanship? You notice how bipartisanship has come to the New York State government all of a sudden. Whatever happened to political gridlock and the scumbags, the liars, these little meat puppets for white supremacy who were lying and saying, oh, ain't no way we go, brother, y'all can't be hitting them up for no money. We got to get Biden in office first before we can make any demands. Notice how they're not making any demands now. They're seeing other people get cut checks, and yet they're laying low. They're hiding. Biden has been in office for about 83 days now. He hasn't even reached the 100-day mark yet. But look at what New York State, Hillary Clinton's former stomping grounds, just did. And yeah, I mentioned that because when Hillary was running for the Senate, she and Bill made it a point to let everybody know that Bill Clinton was moving to Harlem. Hillary only won that Senate seat election in 2001 with 55% of the vote. That's it. 5 percentage points. Former First Lady, you've got Bill Clinton, who carried the state of New York, and all his wife could get was a mere 55% of the vote. Yeah, they knew that they needed to do something to shore up her black support. If she was going to position herself for a presidential run, which both of them and everybody else in the country knew that she was angling for, then she was going to need to demonstrate that she could steamroll her opponent to the polls. 5% margin of victory for a former president's wife when he carried the state of New York, that wouldn't be good enough. Hell, with numbers that sorry, you wind up like Al Gore losing your own state. So after Bill made his big media splash by moving to Harlem, quote unquote, he claimed he would try to help spur economic investment in the area. Of course, as we all know, the only thing that really happened was more angry white people moved into Harlem, and Harlem's been dying a slow, agonizing death by gentrification. A whole bunch of angry white people who have shown nothing but disrespect for the black folks who made Harlem. By the way, Bill Clinton stayed until recently. A lot of Harlem's black residents, however, did not. So all those black people who told us what a great idea it was to vote for Biden because he was going to do all this stuff for black people, where the hell are they at now? All you clowns who made it a point to whine at the black media on Twitter. Stop the man, no check, man. Ain't no money. States ain't got no money. Government broke, man. They broke, man. Thinking you were smart. That's what these white liberals told you to say. Oh, there's no money, you see. No money. No money for you. You morons who called into Jason or Tariq's broadcast to lecture the black media about how Kamala Harris's victims deserve to go to jail because they were all guilty, right? And how Biden would be too scared to defy the black vote because of the uprisings last summer. He wouldn't dare defy the black vote. He knows what could happen if he tries that. Well, where are you morons at now? You've been quiet for a few months now. You've been laying real low. New York's giving illegal aliens $15,000, and Biden is giving black people the silent treatment. Well, that is when he's not lecturing us about how we need to work more with Hispanics. Sure, because that's who they're going to be funneling resources to. The same way the white middle class was invented out of whole cloth by massive federal economic giveaways, now we see the Democrats in the process of engineering the exact same thing for the Hispanic community with massive federal and state giveaways. White supremacy needs people who will be loyal to it. You can grumble about white supremacy just so long as you're not going to overthrow it. Long as you're not actually trying to overthrow white supremacy, that's fine. Long as you toe the line and obey what white supremacy wants you to do, you ain't got to like it. You don't have to do it with a smile on your face or a tap dance on your feet, just so long as you do it. Because these black folks are starting to break bad because there's this grassroots effort to stand our people up and to move our people forward. Yeah, you got these so-called minorities here, whether they be immigrants or non-black groups or what have you, and they understand with a wink and a nod from white supremacy that they've got their place and they're going to stay in their place so long as white supremacy does not give them the Negro treatment. Long as you're not down at the bottom where white supremacy has artificially forced black people to, then these other groups have already made the devil's bargain with white supremacy. White supremacy is quite sophisticated. It relies on buffer classes to give it political cover from outside criticism and to confuse the internal politics of those who it oppresses. We waste so much time trying to build alliances, looking for allies, quote unquote, trying to convince these other groups that they're in the same boat as us. And the reality is they're not. And that's something that black people simply refuse to understand or accept. These other groups are not in the same boat as us. Mainly because white supremacy decided it was going to give black people a boat with nothing but holes in it. And these other groups, they were going to be getting at least solid life rafts. The black people are trying to tell these other groups, y'all in the same boat as us. No, they understand exactly the boat that they're in, or rather the boat that they would prefer to be in. See, these other groups, they only seem to remember white supremacy as a problem when white supremacy's got its foot up their behinds. Then they come to us and we're all in this together. And oh, they suddenly remember that America has a racist past, though they seem to forget about the racism of the last 50 years. That always seems to fall down the memory hole. Oh, Asians will talk about the Asian Exclusion Act. But when you start giving them the rundown, like I did, of all sorts of white supremacist violence against Asians for the last 50 years, all of a sudden they leave that part out. So they understand that they got to be careful with the message they give. Oh, we want to make it seem like American racism was a figment of the past. It was a feature of the past. And oh, we don't want that past to come back. We don't want to imply that it never went anywhere, because that would be to indict the dominant society. And well, we got to be careful of that. Wouldn't want to endanger our model minority status after all. But as soon as white supremacy finishes reminding these groups of what their place in the racial hierarchy is, they go right back to dumping on us. See, our problem is that we have a lot of bootlicks and clowns who keep trying to prop up the lie of the black-brown or black-Asian or black-white left alliance. These are chumps hoping for some interracial sex, or maybe to get some money from one of these groups, but usually they'll settle for the interracial sex. That's usually their main motivation. There are more than a few Negroes who would gladly throw us all under the bus or into a wood chipper for even the slim chance they might get sex from a non-black person. And even after this pathetic sucking up fails, they still keep at it. Why? Because there's no cure for stupid, and being a bootlick is about as dumb as it gets. And no, the black media is not going to stop harping on this. Whenever you got these Democrats and their flunkies saying, oh, ain't no money for a check for y'all, we're showing not, here's the money right here. Contrary to what some fools try to tell themselves, white supremacy is sophisticated. It is brutal, it is hateful, it is evil, but it's also sophisticated. It has to be. No system of oppression that has endured for half a millennium and come to run most of the world can do so without sophistication. This isn't the time for face-saving lies, like some folks try to do. That kind of magical thinking is exactly why so many black people conned themselves into thinking Biden would actually do anything for us. We told you that he would mention black people one time on Inauguration Day, and after that, he'd never mention us again, and that's exactly what he did. And don't think that Cuomo's little stunt's going to stay contained to New York. Expect for California to follow suit. And don't be surprised if one or two red states do the same before it's all over. This is not merely about New York State or about Democratic states or red and blue states. This is about the solidification of a national policy. Red states don't have to be told, oh, make sure you don't cut no check for no black folks, though they do need to be prodded that, hey, we got to make it clear that we're officially elevating these other non-black groups. We're going to go ahead and put a little bit of steam on that one. We got to speed up the process on that one. We got a time constraint here. The niggers are starting to agitate heavy, and we got to get this done as quickly as possible. The race is on to see if they can take us under before black folks finally pull their heads out of the sand. A critical mass of us, I should say. Because the 2020 election is basically, for a lot of black folks, it's going to be the last time that they get to claim otherwise, that, oh, well, Trump was scary. That mean old Trump, we couldn't let him say, yeah, that was scary. He was dangerous. Now they won't be able to hide behind that excuse anymore, not after this. The states are indeed incubators for policy, but they also copy one another's laws as well. All these states are run by white supremacists, no matter what they claim their political affiliation to be. They are all on team white supremacy. They are all operating out of the same playbook and for the same purpose. They have the luxury of denying reality. You don't. You can't afford to pretend that the situation isn't as bad as it clearly is. You don't have the luxury of clinging to fairy tales and lies, though that hasn't stopped some of us from trying. When you mindlessly support people and demand nothing in return, you're telling everyone that you're a sucker. They will use you, and why not? Familiarity breeds contempt, and white supremacy has had 500 years to get real familiar with black people. It's like I taught you. When you run around saying yes to everyone, then what you're teaching them is to take you for granted. They know exactly what to expect from you before they even tell you to do something, because they're so familiar with you. On the other hand, if you want respect, then you better start learning to say no. That way people will realize they don't know what you're going to do. They can't really be familiar with someone when you don't know what to expect from them. So when they come to you they'll know that they just can't tell you to do something and expect you to do it. They have to think first before they even approach you. And when you make it clear that you require something of value before you lift a finger on their behalf, then they're going to understand you are to be taken seriously. So, yes, the black media called it. Not that it took any brains to figure it out. Of course, the Democrats are trying to shore up and solidify a non-black voter base. Of course, they're going all out for this. They realize that the black media has not stopped informing our people and not stopped making it clear there's going to be tangibles before you get this black vote. And that every day more black people are realizing that their support for Biden was a fool's errand. They played themselves. They were played for fools. They let themselves get caught up in their feelings, mostly fear, regarding Trump, when the reality is that having a mouth-frothing racist in the White House actually gave our demands leverage because nobody could deny that we were right. When we said, hey, this is a white supremacist country, look how they're treating black people, and this is the reason why all of our demands are valid and justified, and we should have it. The whole world was looking and saying, well, we can't really say that the niggers aren't being targeted. But now the white media can pretend that Biden is the good guy and America's sins, well, they're being atoned for. How so? Well, they just gave $15,000 to illegal aliens. Those aren't the black people being killed. Those are people from south of the border. Well, Joe Biden has made it clear that he's not going to be calling African countries S-hole countries anymore. So see, that's different. That's better. See, things are getting back to normal. We're going back to the way things were before Trump. Well, before Trump, you had Trayvon Martin being murdered. You had Eric Garner being strangled. You had Walter Scott being shot in the back 8 times. You had Aiyana Jones being killed, a child. You had all this carnage going on long before Donald Trump. You didn't have to wait for Trump to get in the White House before black folks were being killed with impunity. But the white media is putting forward the lie. And now you got a lot of folks who are going to be going, well, that's all behind us now. That's what happens when you allow them to pull this game. Sure, it's a con, but the thing is they feel it's one that they can get away with if we let them. The reality is that wrinkled up racist Biden, he's just a slightly, very slightly more sanitized version of the same white supremacist as Trump. And that's a distinction without a difference. But what black folks allowed to happen was for the left arm of white supremacy to not be broken, so they get to buy themselves some time. And that's what the game has been for the last 150 years. One stalling tactic after the next. Kill, threaten, coerce, cajole, give us fake sympathy, whatever it takes to get black people to be too afraid or confused or cowed or reluctant to take on white supremacy. You're scared of their guns and dogs attacking you. And when that fear subsides, you're scared of them not giving you money or a job. And after that, you're scared that they won't want to be your friend, which actually means you're scared there won't be any interracial sexual access for you. When black people talk about nonsense about being colorblind, that kumbaya stuff, what they're really talking about is interracial sexual access. Well, you're going to have to wake up to reality, like it or not. As one insult against us after the next piles on, more black people will finally give up on denying the reality, and black voter anger will once again be directed, this time at Joe Biden. When that happens, the temporary stay that the Dems managed to get in 2020 will be over. It's going to be Judgment Day. Because there are going to be black people pointing out, hey, you not only did not do anything for us, you prioritized all these other groups, and they're not the foundation of the party. They're not the base of the Democratic Party. We see what you tried to do, and now it's Judgment Day. But understand, lying and making excuses for white supremacy, that's not some victimless crime. As long as we continue to play nice with white supremacy and pretend as if they're our friends, then we're allowing white supremacy to live to oppress us another day. On the other hand, if we've finally had enough and we're sick of letting white supremacy buy itself more time at our expense, then it's time to rise up and be uncompromising about it. This is why what we do is so important. A culture has to come from within. And for far too long, we've allowed the white media and their black bootlick paid off clowns who are in the employ of this or that white institution to dictate to us who we are, allegedly, and what our icons ought to be. That's why I did that video essay last week about exactly that point. So we keep making sure that our people see how giving their vote for nothing was meaningless. We won't let the same scumbags who were cheerleading for Biden's lies hide now. Oh, you're going to be reminded about everything that you said. We're just going to go ahead and keep chronicling this. We're going to go ahead and keep documenting this and making sure black folks see, hey, Biden ain't even passed his first 100 days yet. And what you see is they're doing stuff for everybody except for black folks. The same Democrats who tell you, hey, I'm in the middle of a scandal right now. To save my political bacon, I need some Negroes to hide behind. Oh, thank you for that photo op. Now here's a $15,000 check for illegal aliens. We're going to make sure everybody remembers that. So when these jackasses start rearing their heads in time for next year's midterm elections, we're going to remind everybody, what did the Democrats do for us? The Democrats were all pretending like they were concerned about black folks. No, your concern for me is shown by putting something in my hand that I can take to the bank, because that's what you did for the illegal aliens. That's what you did for the Asians. That's what you're going to do for us.
And now we see a great river city of 1960. Here is an American city replanned around a highly developed, modern traffic system. On all express city thoroughfares, the rights of way have been so rooted as to displace outmoded business sections and undesirable slum areas whenever possible, and undesirable slum areas whenever possible, and undesirable slum areas whenever possible.
Yesterday on Twitter, there was a big dust-up because former presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg had observed what is common sense in America, that racism is ingrained even into some of the highways in the country. Now, of course, you have the right-wing nuts doing their usual devil's advocate. Anything you say, we have to take the contrary opinion and saying, well, this is a parody, right? Oh, as far as they were concerned, that was just too far-fetched. And of course, what happened was you had an avalanche of people who educated these dim bulbs on what they didn't know. Clearly, Google and basic literacy is no friend of the right. Because if the fire ready aim crowd had bothered to actually do a little bit of reading, just a little bit, they would have known that Robert Moses, the most famous urban planner in American history, himself was notorious for how he structured the highways and byways of New York, and gave a model to other states for how to use infrastructure as a means to corral and otherwise control the movements of black people and even demolish black enclaves. This way, you didn't need to send roving gangs of white supremacist marauders to burn down Rosewood. You just use eminent domain and claim, we got to build a highway where you niggers are living and anywhere else you happen to move to. Robert Moses was the patron saint of weaponizing infrastructure against black people. That's what he did when he was in New York. People started going ahead and chronicling this stuff. Now, the main thing happens to be, how come if black people have been mistreated 15 ways from Sunday, why is it that New York State hasn't made amends to these black folks? Yeah, the marginalization of black people, it doesn't just stop at redlining. You had the cities and the states who were arranging themselves and building the very masonry in a way that was meant to shut black people out. The weaponization of infrastructure, ain't nothing new about it at all. You just got through hearing a little clip about how that works. That's how the highway systems were designed. They were designed as a way to go ahead and tear down so-called slums. We're going to displace these slums. Well, the thing is, you can't displace a slum because a slum doesn't get up and go anywhere. You can, however, displace the people who live in these areas that have been deliberately targeted for economic deprivation and impoverishment, which of course is exactly what happened. Slums don't move. People are the ones who get displaced, not slums. And of course, who is it who decides what a slum is in the first place? Oh yes, the same white supremacists who are down at the city planning board deciding what black neighborhoods they're going to have steamrolled. These same white supremacists who were the ones who economically impoverished the black areas in the first place, they're the ones who also turn around and go, well, these places are blighted. It's a matter of black people's neighborhoods must be destroyed. The white ones, well, we need urban renewal, and it needs to be done in a way that improves the standard of living for the people who live there. We're certainly not going to be displacing them. Infrastructure has been used as a weapon in this country for a very, very, very long time. One of the things that I think needs to be pointed out was there was an article that was put in last year about how there was this contractor who was all over on Fox News and right-wing radio saying that he could build Donald Trump's border wall faster and cheaper than the U.S. government could. Now, never mind the fact that this Fisher character, that was, to be generous, that was a gross exaggeration on his part. But the main thing that got me about it, that I don't think got anywhere near as much attention as it should have, is the fact that this Fisher guy who was running around saying Donald Trump should give me the contract to build the wall on the border, I'll get it done cheaper and faster than the U.S. government. Do you know what that guy does, what his company actually does? His company, Fisher Sand and Gravel, they aren't a company that builds walls. These guys, their company, what they normally do is they build highways. And I've been thinking about this ever since last year when I heard about that. That was something that really got to me about that nobody was making any sort of hay about. This guy's company builds highways. They don't build walls. And yet, why did this guy, he was beaten, and he wasn't alone, by the way. There were also other companies who deal mostly in highway projects who were also trying to put their bid in. So why was it that this guy, just taking him as a case study, why was it that a guy who builds highways, why would he even think that he should be building walls? Shouldn't he be the main one looking and going, well, hell, if you want to build a road into Mexico or out of Mexico, I'm your guy. But if you're trying to keep people, you build walls, I don't build walls. Even he should have thought, man, I'd be a weird fit for a project like this, except he didn't think that. He thought, I'm your guy. I'm the one you need to be talking to. Now, why is that? It's because of the legacy of Robert Moses. A good example would be the Dan Ryan Expressway in Chicago. It separates the white enclave of Bridgeport from the black folks who are on the east side of it. You also have others like LBJ in Dallas. I mean, that thing's got so many doggone walls and barriers and such. I'm sitting here going, man, I think Dallas must have half the concrete on the planet poured into their little highways there. And these things are several lanes across. And it's not just one continuous highway across, not flat. It's got drop-offs, big old walls, and it's just like, God dang, how does anybody get over that? And that's the point. The guys who have been building the highways were built and originally designed by people like Robert Moses to be a racial barrier, racial walls meant to keep black folks out, meant to keep black folks contained. So that's the reason why you got people who normally would be building highways who are looking and going, hey, if you're trying to keep these non-white people out of the country and you need a barrier to do it, call us. That's what we do, because that's what the highways have been doing. That's been their primary purpose. Their secondary purpose is as a means for your car to get from point A to point B. But the primary purpose is to carve up the city, to keep certain folks, black folks, contained. Malcolm said it, and it's still as true as it's ever been. Everything in this society under white supremacy is meant to oppress you. Everything in this society is used as a weapon against you. Even the very damn highways. White supremacy is so sick, so vile, so corrupt, so intolerable to decent people. They are so hostile, so violent and aggressive. They take roads and turn roads into weapons of racism. Look, this is not about trying to win some sort of pseudo-academic argument. There is no argument to be had. This is about black people understanding that when these people are talking about highway projects, when they're talking about these sort of projects, everything is being weaponized against you. Everything. They didn't weaponize the highways against Asians or Hispanics or against religious minorities. They didn't do it against the Jews or the Presbyterians or the Moonies or whomever. They did it specifically against black people. And that being the case, you don't ever let these bastards get away with trying to narrowed the discussion only to redlining, as if, oh, well, you see, it was a few banks that did it. Marginalization of black people, that was mostly redlining. See, they're willing to talk about redlining because they can't ignore it. They don't have the ability to pretend as if that's not part of the discussion because we forced it to be. But then when you point out, no, it's not just what the banks were doing, it's what the cities did themselves. And they did it specifically for the purpose of attempting to cage and hem in black people, to contain black people and to keep black people as prisoners in their own cities. That's what it was really about. And you see that the most egregious examples of this are coming not merely from the red states. We expect the Republicans to do that, but you notice how the so-called opposition party, New York City, Chicago, these places are doing the doggone same thing. So what does that tell you? There is no opposition party because both parties are serving white supremacy. As far as they're concerned, they are both one political party, and the real opposition is you and me. We're the opposition that they're trying to defeat. So don't call yourself being naive and putting anything past white supremacy. You got to stay on your guard because there's a whole bunch of little Robert Moses running around out there now, not just the clowns at your local city planning office. These idiots are at all levels. And as the advocates and proponents of Black empowerment, it's our job to do a little bit of urban planning of our own. Only this time, our road to the future is going to run right over them.